If you're one of the many people out there that have had Nelson Nash's Becoming Your Own Banker book sitting on your shelf and have yet to read it, you're in luck because today we're reading it to you. Today we're in part 2, pages 28 to 35. It's all about mindset. Look forward to having you join us. If you're an investor or want to be an investor and you're looking to create passive income that exceeds your monthly expenses, then this is the podcast for you. Here on the Infinite Wealth Podcast, we combine the philosophies of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad along with Nelson Nash's Infinite Banking concept. Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen along with our co-host Anthony Faso. And today we're diving into part 3 of Nelson Nash's Becoming Your Own Banker. And as the intro said, if you're one of those people that have been sitting on this book for a while, you're in luck because we're going to read it to you. We're going to read it to you. You're finally going to get into it. Anthony, you excited about this or what?
More excited than you know, Cameron, for reasons you do not know.
I can take a guess.
Okay.
You must have been working on some one-liners.
To no, not exactly,
Mm.
but when we first did the part one and we had talked about we're going back to the basics
Yeah.
and we had some good zingers back then, and I had kind of shared I really
Oh, man.
hadn't had any good zingers, but you know what, I needed some more material.
Mm.
Like, so make a long story short, we went to a conference not too long ago, and you brought your mother, which was amazing because she'd always wanted to go to Hawaii, and you were able to fill that. So, and it was great. You did that, and also great.
Oh,
I
no.
got to spend some
Oh,
QT
no.
with
You
your
did
mom,
not.
especially after a couple of drinks.
Oh, you did not.
And I've tried to get some info from her for a while. It must have been, I don't know if it was the Hawaiian Air or the Hawaiian drinks, but either way, man, I got me some nuggets. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So just something to look forward to. I'm not gonna waste them all here. In fact, I don't even think I'm gonna use one here, just so you have something to look forward to. So
Mm.
be on the lookout for some good singers. Cause one thing your mom said is gonna be, let's just say I will never forget.
Mm.
Okay.
Great.
But
Great.
in addition to that, it's always great to get back to the basics. And part one, this is one of my favorite sections when we're talking about these human laws. So I'm
Yes.
looking forward, looking forward to digging deeper into these.
As am I, right? We've got some laws that are laid out for us. We're going to be going through pages 28 to 35, like I had mentioned. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to bring some of it up. We'll kind of toss it back and forth, give you some nuggets, and then we're going to grade them at the end, and we'll tell everybody how great mine were.
Okay, let's do it.
Anthony. All right, man. Hey, let's take a look. Part 2, page 28. Nelson Nash starts us off by introducing us to the human problems and understanding Parkinson's law. Anthony, if you were to summarize Parkinson's law, what would you say?
Parkinson's law is one of my favorites, and there's really a couple attributes to it.
Yeah.
One, and honestly, they all hit home with me. One is time expands to work allowed.
Mm.
Uh, it expenses rise to meet income, and a luxury once enjoyed becomes a necessity.
Mm. Well said. Well said. What takeaways do you got from this section?
Well, I admit, like, to me, the biggest one when he talks about time expands the work allowed, which in essence, what he's saying, and tell me if you can't relate to this, right? If you have a month to do a project, you're going to get it due in a month.
Mm.
But if that same project you have a week to do, you're going to get that project done in a week. And for me, I really hit home when I know how efficient I am the day before I go on vacation.
Yeah.
Right. Those last couple hours, man, I'm getting stuff done, just doing everything because I'm focused. Right. But then why can't I just be that focused every day?
I don't know, Anthony. Why can't you?
I don't know.
Yeah, you
I don't
dilly
know.
dally. You come over to the office, knock on the door. Hey, Cam, want to hang out? I'm trying to work over here, man. Yeah. Awesome. That's good. Do you have something else there?
Well, no. Even a luxury enjoyed becomes a necessity.
Yeah.
Which, if we look at that, like I remember my first car Well, it did have AC technically, but it
Mm-hmm.
didn't work,
Mm,
right? Uh, and just get and this was in Las Vegas, right? We're in the desert, so AC is a necessity. But I will tell you, there is no way in heck I'm going to get a car that doesn't have AC.
yeah.
And I mean, folks on a car, even electric windows. I mean, there was a Cameron. I don't know if you understand what this kind of hand signal means, which you're just turning your hand. Is you need to roll down the window,
Yeah.
right? But now you just push a button. And before, like the old days, you had to leave your finger, you had to push a button, and you had to hold it down while the window came. But now the cars have the one touch. You just touch it once, and the window goes down.
Mm.
And I what I if I go in my daughter's car
Yeah.
and
Oh no, you gotta hold it
like it's
all
kind of
three
like you just
seconds.
realize how those little things like there's no way I'm going to have a car that doesn't have AC and doesn't have electric windows.
Mhm.
And the same thing with that income rising. I mean, I remember when I graduated college, I was like, man, I am going to be living it. Right. The amount of money I'm making on this, my first job was, I think, $27,000
Mm,
plus the option of overtime.
dang, that was
Man,
nice of
I
them.
was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, but let me just tell you, right. And that paid all my bills plus some.
Yeah.
Now, not so much. I mean, my living expenses, everything else has rise, and it's um, this is a battle. Most people, really everybody, battles with. I would say.
Oh, I totally agree with you.
What about you, Cam?
Same. I'm guilty, right? Parkinson's law, the idea that work expands to the time allowed. Uh, the most easiest way to say that is procrastination. I'm a
Mhm.
great procrastinator. Man, I get stuff done, but it's going to be right up to the last minute. As I was researching this, one of the things that came to mind was a quote that I've heard often was, "If it wasn't for the last minute, nothing would get done."
Mm.
So I can't tell you the number of times that I've had college papers due that knocked it out, stayed up all night, turned it in, and then went home and took a nap. But you know what? We got it done. As I was looking at this section, right, we've gone through this before. I understand Parkinson's law. I'm certainly guilty of it. There's a couple of takeaways I had, but one of the first things that I did is actually went back and I looked up who Parkinson was.
Mm.
Parkinson, his name was actually C. Northcote Parkinson. He wrote several books. Anthony, do you know what you have in common with Mr. Parkinson here?
Good looks, intelligence.
He was well written. He wrote over 60 books.
Oh, no. Mm.
He was smart. He wrote a lot of satire. He was funny.
Okay.
So, Anthony, you've got nothing in common with Mr. Parkinson. That's the takeaway that I had as I researched this gentleman. But there's a couple articles that he wrote. One of them was Parkinson's Law, where this came from, but it was a satire of government bureaucracies, is what he was talking about. And it started as like a small article in a newspaper, and then he expanded it out to a book. And then he took that idea and he started traveling worldwide and started sharing it. It was pretty interesting. Another example that Parkinson came up with was the law of triviality. The law of triviality, as noted by Parkinson, was that people within an organization commonly give disproportionate weight to trivial issues. So this too was satire, and it was a spoof on management. And so I appreciated this guy's approach. I'm actually like to read more of his stuff because Parkinson's law was kind of a spoof or a satire of government bureaucracy, specifically the British civil services. And then he's got this law of triviality where he's kind of spoofing management and saying, "Hey, uh, typically you guys are wasting time." So I thought that was an interesting piece. Um, when I looked through Nelson's book and this section specifically, it's not a long section. It's
Mm.
less than one page. It's about a page and a half, but he does highlight a couple things. The first one that I wanted to highlight was the section down here where he talks about expenses rising to equal income. I think that's probably one of the easiest things for people to get comfortable with as they kind of mature in life, like you were
Mhm.
talking about, Anthony. As our income increases, if we're not intentional with those dollars, they will be absorbed in the lifestyle. And I was trying to think of examples of where I've seen somebody kind of conquer this. And I was just talking to this gentleman last week. He's a teacher out in San Francisco, out in California. And I will say that we don't have too many teachers as clients.
Mm-mm.
But this guy thinks differently than a lot of people, and specifically, I would say, than most teachers. When we designed this guy's policy, he was asking me about building in an option for future funding because every year they get raises every couple of years
Mm.
or so. And so that was one of the things that we had talked about last week is, hey, the policy's been enforced for a couple of years now. We're going on, I think, year 2 or 3. And we're looking at it and making sure that when his income increases this year, he's got a place to put it. And that was a perfect example of somebody that was being intentional. And I guarantee you that if he was not intentional about making sure that policy had room to accommodate those additional income coming in, that it would have gone somewhere, right? It would have gone somewhere to lifestyle or whatever else, maybe eats out more. And so, a great example of kind of being proactive and making sure you got a place to put those dollars.
Cameron, on that, I was going to ask you, and you actually answered it, is what can someone do to avoid, when we get a raise, we end up just raising our expenses. And I think what you alluded to is having a plan, having some goals of what you can do and anticipate that. And because it's all too easy to get a new car or to move, but to me, I think the biggest obstacle here is if you can't conquer Parkinson's law, very difficult to live the life that you want to live. And I think that that's why Nelson put. What does this have to do about infinite banking? Because I would tell you, I mean, we've talked about writing a book, and my instinct would be, I'm just going to hit you with the facts. Like, here's all the reasons why you got to do it. I mean, but
Bestseller,
right,
bestseller. Yes, lots of spreadsheets.
but what he's taken a better approach because he knows there's obstacles for people to achieve their financial goals and using infinite banking, and that we need to get these conquered. Cameron, you did even more research than expected, which not that I expect a lot from you, so that's not saying too much. Do you have an approximate date on when he wrote those essays?
I don't.
You know what? He was born in 1909 and lived in 1993. No, so I don't know the answer, but uh,
Oh.
it's probably somewhere in the 50s to 60s. So this
Mm,
is something that he wrote maybe 60, 70 years ago. And whenever I see those, it's interesting how those concepts
still really.
still relate, right? We're still human. Um, so it's important to achieve to get to get conquering these human laws.
I got one last thing to add, then we're
Okay.
going to jump over here. Is on page 28 at the bottom. He says, "You don't. It doesn't have to be this way, but it is. Parkinson's law must be overcome daily."
Mhm.
And as we move forward and we go through these 5 kind of problems, you're going to notice that that's a theme, right? Is there's these human obstacles or something that you've got to address daily, right? Is because if you don't, then it's going to consume you. And so that was one thing that I wanted to point out. We'll see it again later. Outside of that, just add, hey man, we got to be intentional with dollars and making sure we're being proactive.
Well done, Cam.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Faso, moving on. Willie Sutton's Law. Everybody loves Willie Sutton. He was a bank robber way back when. They asked him why he would rob banks, and he would tell them because that's where the money is.
Mm.
Anthony, what's a takeaway or two you had from Willie Sutton's Law?
What he, what was very interesting, where Nelson's alluding to particularly, is the taxes and the IRS, and he had shared an example that we were if you were to come into a mall and I hold a gun against your head and say, "Hey, give me your money," everybody around there is going to call me a thief,
Yeah.
right? But he says, "Well, what if I went there an hour earlier, talked to everybody around there, and says, hey, Cameron's got all this money he doesn't need. Look at him. Look at that beautiful hair and his beautiful clothes. He doesn't need all that money. I'm going to take the money and I'm going to give it to all of us." And then that's considered taxes. So Nelson was very adamant of what the government was taking in regards to taxes. And also, when I look at the taxes we're paying, I think we get it's just we just accept it, right? That it is what it is. But the amount of taxes that they are taking, not just income tax, I'll say I, I don't know why I got in this, but I started looking at my property tax. I'm paying $500 a month, like
Dang.
for property tax.
Yeah.
That's just irking me. You know what I could do with 500? I mean, what? But anyways,
Get a
uh,
haircut.
but oftentimes I think we've just accepted that the taxes that the IRS has always been around. It's only been around since 1913.
Yeah.
Before that, there was no income tax. One thing that also stood out to me, he talked um, about uh, what is legal plunder. And what he legal plunder is if you take something that belongs to somebody and gives it to somebody else it doesn't belong to, like that's theft.
Yeah.
And how much we are doing that with our taxes and we just accept it. And what is interesting, if we look at, and I was trying to think for myself, what is my largest single expense? I mean, so the mortgage comes up there, car car payments, um, rent here, kind of all these other expense. But my largest single expense, Cam, any guess what it is?
Taxes.
It's income tax. That's not even taking into account all the other payroll taxes that I'm paying. So I think the point is a couple. What he's trying to make is, for one, we shouldn't just sit back passively and um, all these taxes is one thing, but also the amount of money that they're spending is increasing as well. I mean, and they're spending even though they're taking in more than they ever have. They're sending out more than they ever have as well. Right. So the problem isn't them having enough income. The problem is them having too much expenses. And so we need what that says. So what can we do? Well, we need to be conscious of the tax impact. And so we should be looking at buying assets that are going to minimize or ideally not be taxable. And we need to keep our savings in, again, an asset that we can save money in taxes. And when we want some income or cash flow in retirement, we need to be thinking of the tax impact on that. And so I'm not just talking about putting money in a 401k and having to pay the tax, but there's a lot of things in between there that, again, the taxes are one of the biggest erosions of your wealth. Or some takeaways you had, Cam?
Man, I'm going to echo some of what you said, so I won't go too far in depth. But again, taxation is really what he's talking about here. And Nelson hammers this stuff home. What I appreciate about Nelson is he doesn't mince words, right? He's pretty black and white. Like, you should read some of the words that he's using in here. One quote that I like is, government's not capable of producing anything. It gets all its sustenance from the productive element of society. Government is a parasite and lives off the productive taxpayers, the host. To echo what you said a minute ago, Anthony, one of my favorite social media clips, I see it every now and then, is when some young adult goes out there and starts working and they see their first paycheck and they go, what in the heck is this? Right? They go through, they end up with, 6%, 70%, whatever they end up earning, and they get all fired up. And that one, and then the other one is, I've seen this clip lately as well, is where some young adult again is going out there and coming to this realization, and they sit there and they go, wait a second. So I have to pay taxes on money I earn.
Mhm.
And then I have to pay taxes on money I spend.
Mhm.
Then I have to pay taxes on money I save.
Mhm.
Well, this doesn't seem right. Right. And it's those little glimpses that young adults need. And we've got to amplify those, right? I believe it's our job to make sure people are aware of those things, because I think that taxation, has kind of crept in, and now it's just assumed as a way of life. And so that's one of the things that we do need to push back on. Man, we've got to overcome this, and this is what Nelson's echoing, is that, man, you don't have to take that, right? Is you guys, us as individuals, do control, have some control over this. And so that's what he's urging us to do. How do we control it? Man, is we don't have to play their game, right? What he talks about is the government will bring in some taxation issues, and then they give you a handout or a solution or an exception to what they're doing. And that's what you see all of these government programs and some of the exceptions there. But man, you know what? I quit playing that game a long time ago, right? I said, hey, listen, I'm going to pay you whatever taxes I owe you in this specific year. And then I'm going to take all my money and I'm going to put it over here in life insurance that's structured for cash. And I'm never going to have to worry about you guys ever again. And so you don't have to play the game that everybody else is playing. And that's the takeaway here on Willie Sutton's Law for me. The other one, this is not, sorry, this is the other one quote that was this one I really liked. I think he's quoting Frederick Bastiat here, but he says there's two methods or means, and only two, whereby man needs and desires can be satisfied. One is the production and exchange of wealth. That's the economic means.
Mm-hmm.
The other is the uncompensated appropriation of wealth produced by others. This is the political means, and this is what he's referring to as legal plunder. What I wrote here in the notes was that this is a disease, right? Once somebody gets a handout, they become infected with this, and there's no cure for that. And that's where I see kind of these last several years as kind of being a huge detriment to a whole generation of kids, is that they're getting used to handouts, and that is a one-way street to nowhere.
You know, I'd heard this on another podcast where they had talked about if you give somebody something one time, they are very thankful and appreciative. You give it to them a second time, they're not as appreciative, but there's still some appreciation. The third time, they're starting to expect it, and by the fifth time, it's an obligation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an oftentimes, and it starts good. Well, hey, like, you need a little bit. All right, let me help you out. But then we're not learning anything, so they need more. Well, we do a whole podcast on this, but this episode we went into a few of the human factors. In our next episode, we're going to continue down the path of becoming your own banker, starting with the remaining human laws that you need to overcome to be able to achieve your goals. Go make it a fantastic day. If you like this video, I know you'll like this one. And if you want to learn how investors use infinite banking to increase their returns and lower their taxes, check this out. And if you have some questions and want to see if infinite banking is for you, hop on a discovery call with us. Link for that will be in the description.